Boa noite, galera! Bem-vindos ao primeiro Café com Quiro, um bate-papo super descontraído sobre quiropraxia, organizada pela ONG Quiropraxia Sem Fronteiras. Eu sou a Larissa Coelho, da ONG, a Vivi Rocha também está aqui, da ONG. Hoje nós estamos com o Rafael Santos e o Felipe Ferreira, brasileiros, e especialmente para essa live, o Seth Levine e a Pam, de Massachusetts, nos Estados Unidos. Antes de começar o nosso papo, eu queria apresentar o programa Café com Quiro. Ele é um programa desenvolvido pelo Núcleo de Educação da ONG. Então, todo mês nós vamos bater papo com quiropraxistas brasileiros e estrangeiros. Serão papos descontraídos, cheio de novidades, coisas legais. Estamos abertos para sugestões. Então, a primeira coisa que eu queria pedir para vocês, já se inscrevam no canal da ONG Quiropraxia Sem Fronteiras aqui no YouTube. E já clica no sininho para vocês receberem as notificações quando a gente ficar online. Tem mais um pedido. Já aproveita e manda esse link aí para os amiguinhos quiropraxistas para eles participarem ao vivo com a gente desse papo. Então, agora eu vou deixar aberto para todos, né? Quero agradecer a presença de quem está aqui comigo ao vivo. Quero agradecer também o nosso apoiador, o Café Olinto, de Franca. Café com Quiro, gente! Saúde para vocês! Vivi, palavra sua.
Vamos lá, então. Bom, a ideia surgiu para a gente realmente, como a Lari falou, ter um papo descontraído sobre quiropraxia. Eu acho que o quiropraxista a gente gosta muito de conversar e trocar essas ideias e poder ter esse conteúdo dentro de um canal para quem quiser ouvir, né, em qualquer momento aí. E aí veio a ideia desse apoiador que a gente tem do Café, que mais tarde a gente vai falar sobre isso, e convidar nossos amigos a participarem também desse papo. Então, convidei o Rafa, o Fê, queria que eles falassem também um pouquinho, para a gente começar o papo.
Tarde, galera. É uma honra estar aqui com vocês. Papo com essas figurinhas que já estão aí, sempre é bom papo, né? Não precisa nem ter pauta, não precisa ter nada. Então, reunião organizada é melhor ainda. Tamo aí.
Boa noite, pessoal. É um prazer enorme estar aqui junto com vocês. Mais um grande evento de quiropraxia, com muita informação, muita coisa boa e um papo descontraído, já saquei. Vai ser divertidíssimo e é muito bom rever o Seth, a Pam, e vamos em frente. Vai ser muito divertido hoje. Muito obrigado pelo convite, Viviane, Larissa.
Obrigado vocês.
Gente, preparem o café de vocês e vamos para esse papo. Seth, Pam, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you to participate with us. And it's your time.
Okay.
Introduce yourselves.
Very excited to be here, too. It's really our pleasure. We're very grateful for the invitation. So, because there's probably people in the audience that don't know me or Pam, let's start by simply introducing ourselves, giving us a little history for you. Pam, you want to start?
Sure. My name is Pam Jarboe, and I started my career in chiropractic by getting a job working for a chiropractor. And this was back in 1986, and it was in New York. And my chiropractor used to go into Harlem and adjust babies in this place called Hale House. And these babies were born drug addicted and had AIDS and been abandoned by their parents. And we would go in and adjust them. And I got to see the amazing transformation that occurred with these children under chiropractic care. They had asthma and allergies and bedwetting, but night terrors and all kinds of emotional problems, and they wouldn't want anyone to touch them. And then, week after week, we would go there, and, within a short amount of time, they were jumping into our arms. And it was just incredible feeling to be a part of. And I also got to watch the quiet miracles in practice, where people were getting what they were not getting meaning that they were not getting sick and they were getting the feeling of harmony in their life and being on their path. And, you know, it was just a really beautiful experience to watch what happened. And so I decided to become a chiropractor. I went to Life University, where Seth went also, and I graduated in 1994. And I've practiced in 5 different places, and I settled here in Massachusetts, and I'm so happy to be able to help in any way I can in the profession. It's such an honor to give back, because so many people were so good and mentored me. I was a very shy and hesitant and doubtful person, so it's an honor to be a teacher at any point in the profession.
Thank you, Pam. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Seth Levine. And my history in chiropractic goes back a long ways too. I first went to a chiropractor when I was a kid because my great uncle was a chiropractor. He graduated in 1923, 1923. And so at our family meetings, he would adjust everybody. But it really didn't mean anything to me until I went to a chiropractor when I was 16 years old. I saw a very small advertisement in the local newspaper inviting anyone who wanted to go to a small talk, an aula, that the doctor gave every Wednesday night, DE guy.
Yeah.
And so I went with a friend of mine to this talk, and there were maybe 15 or 20 people there. And the doctor, Dr. Lou Panuccio, wonderful man, you know Lou?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
He gave just the basic talk. It was about an hour. It had the 4 basic components of any chiropractic explanation, which we'll go over later. And at the end of it, I was thinking, how come I never heard about this? This is so cool. I was kind of a hip little kid back then. I got under care. He took x-rays and found a variety of subluxations. And I was going a few times a week. And after about 3 months, I had no more seizures. I had a seizure disorder. Now, I didn't even tell him I had a seizure disorder. And he wouldn't have cared because his care wasn't based on any condition I had or didn't have. But I'll always remember that. Now, what's interesting is that when my seizures went away, I was not impressed at all. It's like, in my mind, because of what he taught me, I was thinking, of course my seizures went away. Why wouldn't they go away? This guy was removing interference to the expression of intelligent, healing life energy in my body. Of course my seizures went away. It's funny now because in my office, when someone tells me, hey, doc, I'm not taking this medicine, or I no longer have this problem, now I'm ringing bells and say, don't tell me, tell Bob and Mary and Bill. It's just funny how it's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? So I went to, I finished my university training in a completely different subject. And then I moved to Brazil. I lived in Rio de Janeiro in 1975. And then I was walking along the beach in Leme. And I remember I could probably tell you the exact spot on the beach. And in my mind, I'm going to be a chiropractor. That's how it hit. It's almost like a rock fell on my head. And I changed my complete plan, returned to the United States, went back to school to get some prerequisite training in chemistry and physics and biology, and then went to Life College in the first year. So I started school in 1975. 75.
Right, they were just born.
Yeah, no, they weren't born yet. And yeah, don't tell me when you were born. Yeah, don't do the math. Yeah. And so so I've been in practice for 43 years. How do you like that?
Mm-hmm.
Café.
Chiropractic school used to be in a cave for Seth. Yeah.
Yeah. This was no computers.
Yeah.
We had typewriters. Anyone know what a typewriter is? Hands?
funny.
No one? Okay, yeah.
Never mind.
Anyone seen a typewriter? Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better. So today, because time is limited, we want to create realistic goals for what we accomplish today. And we want to create an opening, a sense of possibility, a way to explore for yourselves the idea of applying philosophy into our practice.
Mm.
Most of you, I know you all very well, and many people on the call probably are in practice and have a predisposition to subluxation correction, to a vitalistic philosophy and a philosophy-based practice. But applying philosophy into the practice is always a challenge. And one of the areas that it is one area that's a big component of the application of philosophy in practice is the care plan. What is it that we recommend to a new patient when they come in after their examination? For most of us in this country, we do it on the second visit. For some people, they do it on the first visit. But one way or another, what is the recommendation that we give? And the care plan is really, am I hogging the time?
No, go ahead.
The care plan is a reflection of so many things. It's a reflection of our philosophy. What we recommend to a patient for care is a reflection of our vision for our practice, for our patients, for ourselves, for our community, and even a reflection of how we see the profession moving forward, the health of the profession, not just of our patients and practice. It's also a reflection of our sense of obligation and responsibility towards excellence, towards our profession. It's also a reflection of our willingness to assume the role of leadership. Leadership because a patient comes to us and they need help. They have questions. They don't know what chiropractic is. They have a problem that they want us to solve, but we need to be leaders. And we're leaders whether we give them a care plan or not. But the care plan is either going to be meaningful in changing their life, or it may just help them get a little better with regards to their pain. The other thing it's a reflection of, I'm looking up here because I have notes on the wall. The care plan is also a reflection of our commitment to excellence and to mastery of what we do. Care plans don't happen suddenly. It's an evolution, and Pam and myself have been through so many evolutionary stages. So we want to share with you today things that will just open your mind to the possibilities to explore for yourself. We can, at a later date, give you details about how to actually create a care plan, what's necessary, the science, the certainty, the infrastructure in the office. So let's hold that today. We'll just make an exploration of it.
It's such a vast concept. If we just talk about, there's so much to talk about care planning, because there's a lot of structure that's needed. There's a lot of understanding the psychic dynamics. But if we're just talking about the philosophy of chiropractic, and we recognize that there is no process that does not require time, right? So it's so simple, to apply that, we have to give it time and repetition and consistency. And that is what's required in order for the body to be allowed to express itself at 100%. And so, I remember when I was a just new chiropractor, I was just out of chiropractic school. One of my mentors was Donnie Epstein, who developed Network Chiropractic. And I used to go to his practice when he was in practice many years ago. And so, I could call him and ask him questions, which is amazing, that I would be in practice and call him up and I would ask him about things. And I had a teacher that would come and get adjusted by me. I was very intimidated by that. I had a lot of intimidating patients because I just thought oh my gosh, who am I to be adjusting this guy, And so I was adjusting this teacher and he had a heart attack. And I called Donnie. I was really shaken because he didn't have a heart attack on the table. Oh. He had it within hours though, after the adjustment. And, as a student, you're just taught this is the worst thing that can happen. I mean, not really, but, so I was super freaked out and upset about it. And I called Donnie. And so he said, well, what was his care plan? And I was like, I don't know, he was in charge. He's my teacher. I didn't give him a care plan. I barely gave anybody a care plan. And so, I was looking for Donnie to comfort me in that phone call. And he just really lambasted me or yelled at me and said, nobody can feel their spine. You can feel their spine. It doesn't matter who they are, if they're another chiropractor or whatever, if they're the president of the United States, they can't feel their own spine. You can. You're the one that's doing the checks. You're the one that's doing the parameters. You're the only person that can give them that information. And it just really struck me, I needed that wake-up call to recognize people are vulnerable. People are vulnerable and they're in our hands, literally. They're literally in our hands and they need us and they're asking us. And so what I recognized is that when I'm in the adjusting mode and I'm in my regular shift, I'm in healer mode, right? I'm in angel mode. But when I'm in the new patient appointment and I'm in the report of findings, I'm in gladiator mode. I'm in teacher mode. It's a different archetype and I have to assume a different energy because I'm in charge. I'm the person that they're asking to lead. So that was a really big wake-up call for me.
Gente, eu preciso falar um pouquinho o que a Pam falou em português agora. Que quando ela está conhecendo a pessoa pela primeira vez, ela se lembra que aquela pessoa está nas mãos dela. E ela entra num estado completamente diferente, um estado de gratidão, um estado angelical, um estado de doação, né? Porque aquela pessoa está dependendo do que a gente faz. Isso é lindo, a gente tem um poder incrível nas nossas mãos.
Before we go any further with the subject of care plans, I was talking to Pam earlier. Most people who know me and who know Pam think of us as very inspired chiropractors. But the reality is that much of my career, day to day in practice, is spent thinking about finances and patient and note-taking and insurance and whatever else, the grind, the grinding of day-to-day practice. So let's take a minute and just talk about first how amazing chiropractic is. Just to remind ourselves, in my practice, every once in a while, every 3 days, I realize, wow, this is fabulous. Mm-hmm. I get reminded. That's a little more often than that, but it's so easy to get lost. Mm-hmm. We have the best healthcare product on the planet. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, with our 2 hands, it's all we need. We don't need kinesio tape or oxygen injections or any stuff like that. With our 2 hands and our training, we can remove the interference to the expression of life itself, actual life. When we heal, when we cut ourselves and we're healing, that is an act of creation. When those cells are recreating and filling in, that's life itself. And we remove the interference to the expression of that. I mean, it's like, when you think about it, it's like amazing. And on top of that, in addition, there is such a force of life in every person. the force of the innate intelligence and the creation of life in people is so powerful that for us as practitioners, it's like riding a big horse in the direction it's already going. We don't even have to do a whole lot. With just the lightest touch, if we analyze properly, a push, a touch, a drop, whatever your technique, a click, whatever the technique is, that's all it takes to engage this innate intelligence, this vital life energy, and allow it to express itself. So with very little work on our part, very little work, we can maximize the expression of intelligent life energy, vitality in people. It's mind-boggling when you think about it. I mean, that's what we do every day, and people pay us for it, and they love us for it, and we love them for trusting us. I mean, does it get any better than that? Is there any profession that could even come close?
Yeah, I agree. I think about how amazing our profession is, especially in the pandemic. I'm not sure what it's like in different countries, but here in the United States, a lot of people are super afraid. And I just think it's a privilege to not be afraid. It's a privilege to trust life. Like, that's an incredible advantage that we have. I feel like it's a privilege that I get to touch people in a pandemic. I can't imagine how bonkers I would feel if I couldn't. And so, I think about that. And I also think about the invisible, I talk a lot about the invisible miracles, because I love the visible miracles, but the invisible miracles are when we adjust people and we release that life force, that Seth is talking about. It's not just for the moment, and it's not just what it's doing for like someone's asthma, allergies, headaches, low back pain, all that stuff, which we love, because if we adjust somebody and they say that, like Seth is saying, ring the bell, like something changed, ring the bell, let's tell everyone. But what about like when it's not overt? And it's so, a patient said to me just this past week, you probably won't think this is a big deal, but since I've been coming here for about a year, one of the big things I've noticed is that I'm not afraid to get touched anymore.
Wow.
And so she had been drugged and attacked. And so she's just super jittery about anybody touching her at all, never mind when she's face down and can't see what's going on. And she said, I actually enjoy coming here and I trust you. And I'm like so tender because, it's a pandemic and it's kind of stressful. And I just started crying because I was like, oh, that's not a small thing to me at all. Because I used to be like that when I first started in chiropractic. I was very freaked out by all the hugging. The constant hugging of everyone and the touching, and my boss was touching me out. And I had my first in-body experience getting adjusted. It was an amazing feeling. I felt at peace and I felt at home. And that was an incredible feeling. I had never had that before. So I also felt like it was okay for me to get touched. And that's an amazing thing, but not just for me. Think about what that was like for my children or my grandchildren. And so my chiropractor who was adjusting me didn't know that I didn't like that or that I couldn't handle it. So there's this invisible ripple wave that you don't likely even know about often when you're putting your hands on people, that it's changing them in ways that you can't predict in how they become more alive, but also you can't predict what that's doing to their relationships and the next generation and the next generation. It isn't a small thing. It's really incredible that we get to offer this product to the public.
Yeah. It brings up a story. We have a mutual friend, Stu Bittman. Oh, yeah. And Stu told me this story. The hair on my arms rise when I think about it. He said he had a guy come in for some complaint, a shoulder problem. Didn't matter to Stu since he doesn't treat shoulders anyway. And he was adjusting his guy over a number of months. And after about 3 months or 4 months, this patient was scheduled for his reevaluation. And it wasn't so much a clinical evaluation, checking range of motion of the shoulder. It was a check-in to see how his life is going. Now the guy, so Stu, looking at his notes, saw that he was making objective progress. But the guy said, well, yeah, not really much has changed. And he said, my shoulder, it still hurts. Maybe it's a little better. And Stu said, well, nothing has changed. He said, no, not really. I can sleep on my shoulder a little better, but it still hurts. And Stu was kind of confused because he saw in his clinical notes that each time the adjustment was successful, by whatever metric Stu used, each time he felt comfortable that we're good for today, see you next time. And so jokingly, he said to this patient's child, a 4 or 5 year old child, maybe a little older, was in the room, didn't anything get better with your father? And the child looked at Stu and he said, he doesn't hit us anymore. And, it ties into what Pam says, you never know what effect the adjustment will have in somebody's life. I mean, here's a guy whose shoulder never got better, but a fundamental and deep part of his life changed. He wasn't beating his children anymore. I mean, think about that just from the chiropractic adjustment. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, Seth, I heard this before, so it's the second time that I'm hearing this. It's not a lie, it's true. So what metrics do you have to recommend a care plan? What do you use?
Should I take it?
Yeah, you want to? I'm okay. I can start.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so every office is going to do this differently. But, in my office, I do weight-bearing tests. So I just choose simple scales and show the difference between one side and the other. And if it's within 5 pounds, I'll consider that normal. But often here, I'll see people have 20-pound difference or 30-pound difference. And so that's, 4 times or 5 times higher than what we really want to see. And so that's one of the tests. Range of motion is another test. Posture analysis, we use an app that's called Posture Screen. And so we do that printed analysis for them. And then I use an analysis once the patient is prone on the table. I do extensive leg checks, heel tension, abduction, adduction, eversion stress, palpating muscles, palpating intervertebral segments. And I talk that all out to them. I try to explain to a person, look, when I feel your spine and I, move on it, what you want it to feel is like I'm stepping on a trampoline. So you're going to feel a give. And then I show them where there's a give and then where there's not a give. And so I already had explained chiropractic before, and I explained chiropractic like a traffic jam. So I'm like, right there, that's like a traffic jam, that's going to make it hard and create overflow and underflow, because that blockage is there. And so, then I print up a report and I give them a report. It's quite detailed. It's actually a booklet and, it's like many pages. So, it gives them a lot of information about what's going on with them, and it explains a lot about chiropractic. So, but those are the tests. I do refer out sometimes for x-rays, but that's one of the ways that we're different because they don't automatically do x-rays for every single person.
So, I have a slightly different approach, but there's a lot of overlap. Many people come to us in an acute state, but it doesn't take a lot of training or awareness or sensitivity to also see beyond the acute state and get a sense of what the chronicity is, what the chronic infrastructure to the problem is. Because it's when we as chiropractors give enough time and repetition over time to the care, that it's the deeper chronic infrastructure that gets an opportunity to change. And that's really what allows this blossoming of people's expression of life and healing. So in my office, I'll do, a simple exam. I'll look at their structural alignment. But like Pam, what I'm observing as this takes place is, what is their tone? Is this someone that has a sympathetic tone? Can you see in their posture that what they're experiencing now has roots that go back probably for decades and decades and decades? Of course, depending on their age. even in kids, teenagers can often have chronic roots that you can perceive. So we look for tone, and like Pam, we're finding, we're locating and detecting subluxation through heel tension and leg checks and all the things that we need to know how to adjust them. In addition, I take x-rays in my office and I do an analysis. I've shown some of you the modified Penning's analysis. It's a very simple way to determine, it's got a long history of clinical validation, but it's also a very good way to engage our new patient because they can see exactly what I'm seeing on the x-ray. But my care plan is not particularly based on the acute component. It's really based on the chronic or the infrastructure to the subluxation and neurological pattern. And we'll say this over and over again, it's repetition over time in care that makes all the difference in the world. For us to meaningfully change the trajectory of someone's life through their nervous system, it's not going to happen in 6 visits. It's not going to happen in 20 visits. It's most likely with chronic patients, the real meaningful change of trajectory is going to take place over the first year, even really. The recommendations may not start with a year, but we have to keep in mind that we're out to change the trajectory of their life and life expression.
You're making a really good point because the question was about what test do you use, or how do you decide, what a care plan is. So I went to what the exam is, but after the exam, then I sit and I think about like, okay, how long has the problem been here? That can have 2 aspects. One is how long they've been feeling it, but how long, like if you're looking at x-rays, you can see degeneration. And so, or if you're doing even like motion palpation, you can see the depth of problem in someone's system, and they may be asymptomatic. So, that's one thing, and that might come with time, but you can compare, your family spine to the spines that you're adjusting and know, like, quantitatively, that's not good. They have a lot more strain on them. So how long the problem's been there, how bad the problem is, and what your parameters are showing you. So, I do think that, like, for me, I had to get brave and recommend a year of care to people in order to allow myself to see the vast transformation that comes with consistency over time. And so some of it, I just had to grit and do it. It is amazing the miracles that occur when a person is allowed to have that freedom of the expression of the nervous system with consistency over time.
Yeah, and to create a care plan that is focused on correcting subluxation, it's good to develop, and it takes time to do this. I wasn't able to do this early on in my career, but to develop a system of analysis that you can create a plan of corrective care completely irrespective of symptoms. A person can, the difference, think about this too, especially in light of what's happened with physical therapy and chiropractic in Brazil. If a patient goes to a physical therapist and says to them, hey, I have no symptoms. I feel great. I'm athletic. I have no stress. I eat well. I can do whatever I want. Please create a care plan for me. They'd look at that person like they're crazy, right? Same with an orthopedist. But if a person comes to a chiropractor who has a skill set of the detection and the analysis of subluxation in a context, in the whole person's context of their where they've been in their life in terms of their nervous system and the stresses, that person comes to us and tells us, I have no pain, I have no symptoms, I can do whatever I want, I have no stress, I feel great, I've never had symptoms. We'll say, fabulous, get on the table, let's check your spine for subluxations. And we can actually create a care plan, including x-rays, that would create a point A to a point B.
So after the examination, after the metrics, How do you know the frequency? Like this person needs to come once a week, this one two, this one three. I know you two are talking about correctness subluxation and talking about the nervous system, and we know it takes time. So would be like 2 time is better than 1, 3 is better than 2. Like learning something new would be correcting the subluxation for the nervous system. Learning something new like music, like anything.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Like
Once
it
you
is
address
a
the learning
training.
process,
Right.
yeah.
It is a training. I think about it like, okay, if you went to a cardiologist and you had heart blockage, the degree of blockage is going to match what the care plan is. Right. And it's also going to influence the amount of time that you'll need to do it. And so it's a similar thing. So every technique in chiropractic has different parameters. So we do need to, I can't hand everyone my technique, but if when I talk to my coaching clients, I talk about what if we were to rate it on a scale of 0 to 5, right? So if you think about people that you take care of who are zeros or ones, or twos even, but what I also think about the category of people who don't change. I don't know if you see this, you adjust them and the changes are so minimal. So if they're, at a 4 or 5 and the changes are so minimal, they require a more intensive care plan. Oh, the other thing that influences my care is how severe the problem is, meaning symptomatically and also in my testing, how long it's been there, but also what their current lifestyle is like. So if I know that a client has told me that they are, super stressed out and have a lot of physical, chemical, and mental, emotional stresses, I will make a more intensive care plan because of that. So I do consider like the choices in my office when someone first begins would be 3 times a week, twice a week, or once a week. And so I put them in those lanes depending on how severe those parameters are on a scale of 0 to 5. But let's say somebody comes in and I feel they're a 4 or 5 and I recommend a more intensive care plan and they say they can't for whatever reason. I volley with them a little bit, but what I also will do is sometimes I'll say, okay, well, I'll see you at twice a week, but instead of doing that for 3 months, we're going to do that for 6 months or do it for a year. So we'll just go slower, but for longer in order to make the changes we need to make. And so that's another possibility. But I've also, because of that man who had the heart attack, I am the boss. And it's, I'm a sweetie pie, but when I'm in that room, I am the boss. And so I had another person come in whose spine felt so terrible to me and I just wouldn't back down. And I said, I understand that you think you don't have the time for this, but I just have to tell you, I know what I'm seeing and it really requires for you to pay attention. And he started getting intensive care. And what actually ended up happening is that he had a brain tumor that was undiagnosed, young family, all this stuff. But I knew what I was feeling, that there was a significant problem in the nervous system. And so he ended up passing away like within a year, but I was really sure that we needed to like remove that pressure in the nervous system. So I think, you need to figure out what your lanes are based on your technique, but usually the lanes are once a week, twice a week, or 3 times a week. And then you have to figure out your parameters and what lane to put them in based on those parameters.
So my practice is a little different. I have as much of a neurological focus, but it's also a very strong structural component. And so if someone comes in and I can determine that they're having whatever problem, but there's a chronic infrastructure to it, and I can see, irrespective of their symptoms, I can see in their structural alignment, in my palpation, all the various metrics, including the X-ray, I'll start with 3 times a week minimum for at least 3 months. My first reevaluation is after about 3 months. It's not that I don't actually depend on the clinical research behind it, but there is a lot that shows that in order to facilitate changes in the connective tissue, it requires repetition over time. And that's just the actual soft tissue that affects subluxation. Neurologically, that's a whole other component, because we don't know what people go home to. Like Pam says, we don't know what their real lives are like. So I know that when someone comes in, an adult spine with chronic indicators, that every step forward that we take when they're on the table, as soon as they get out of bed in the morning the next day, they're going to lose part of that. And we expect that. So the road from bad to better is not a straight line, excuse me.
Yes, okay.
It's ups and downs, but the trend or the trajectory is up. So I want to give their nervous system and their spine time to heal both structurally, and their nervous system to relearn new strategies to deal with the stresses. And that happens just because that's what the nervous system does. That's why it's so easy for us if we just give it time and repetition. Most chiropractors don't give their patients enough time to really make the deep, profound neurological changes that was the basis of chiropractic. Going back in history to DD and BJ, they used to take care of their patients for months and months on end. I remember BJ once said to me, he said, no, just kidding, I'm not that old. I said to DD, I said, DD, exactly. You know, I'm not that old. I'm old, but I'm not that old.
But Seth, with a child, would you recommend three times a week also? Or like 14 years old?
Yeah.
Depends on the child. Right?
Yes. So maybe not for as long, but the intensity in the beginning is helpful. Maybe just not 3 months or 4 months. A little bit goes a long way with a child, but that repetition, especially when it's done intensively, is what allows the body to wake up to the innate.
It's not to think like child needs to come in 1 month. It's too much for a child in 1 month.
Oh, yeah,
15 days.
Yeah.
Well, I think about it like, how would I want to take care of my child? If my child had
every week at least.
Every week, but also when my children were challenged, I did check them more than once in a day. I do recommend that for some of my patients, you know, and that is an intensive care plan. So one of the things that I was thinking about, an analogy that our friend Patty Giuliano gave us. She's married to Dr. Peter Kevorkian, and they have an incredible practice, and she's such a good teacher. And she had said to a patient, like, I need to bail you out faster than life is filling you up. Imagine you're a canoe and you keep getting dinged and water is leaking into your canoe. When you come to see me, you're practically overflowing. So when I give you an adjustment, that's 1 cup out of the canoe and that's another cup, but life is filling you up faster than I can bail you out. And so that's why we need to have you come in more often. And people always, the women that I take care of in my office, they get that because that's the way they feel. You know, they almost can see that that's what's happening. So, you know, I make a joke with people. Sometimes they'll say like, you know, I don't know if you're going home and drinking paint thinner, you know, so I can adjust you and get your nervous system healthier, but then you go back out into the world and they acknowledge, they know that's part of what they're doing. Not paint thinner, but maybe donuts or something. I don't know.
Something wrong with drinking paint thinner?
Yes, paint thinner bad since when?
A little lemon.
We picked a bad day to stop sniffing glue.
Yeah. So the care plan we've established is a very important part of the successful delivery of vitalistic care. And the reality is that we have a care plan whether we give one or we don't. If we don't give a care plan, what's the natural default that happens in our practice? People come in, they pay, they get adjusted, and when the pain stops or it doesn't, they say, well, I'm done, right? So a care plan is what's necessary to take a patient from what they think they need to what we know in a position of leadership is what they really need. So there's always this delicate balance that we all have to struggle with, and I think it's important to struggle with, that we want to honor what a patient wants, but at the same time, as the doctors, we have to give them what they need. And that's a very beautiful dance that we do from the minute they come in and establish trust to how we examine them, what questions we ask them, and what we ultimately recommend. So the plan, like our philosophy, expresses the why of what we do. In other words, if we were just wanting, if why someone is under care is to treat pain, then our recommendations are going to be different than if we want them to have an amazing life full of healing and self-expression. Joe Strauss said in his book this wonderful, wonderful thing. He said, let me see if I can remember it exactly. He said, while it's important to know why a patient comes to us, it's even more important for us to know why we're going to take care of them. And so, you know, you can have two doctors who will assess the very same patient, and they use the exact same technique, let's say Gonstead or Thompson or SOT. But if those doctors have two different philosophies, if they have two different why, the question why, then their recommendations for care plans are going to be completely different. When I first studied Gonstead, actually, when I was in school, Clarence Gonstead came to life, and he was an amazing guy. But it was later that I took Gonstead technique with the Cox brothers, and it was like a totally different thing. You know, it was just I couldn't believe how different it was in terms of what care plan people would recommend. Mm-hmm. So it's evolved into this thing of just treating pain. So the same, it's not the technique you use, it's the reason, the intent is what's behind the care plan.
Mm. Bravo.
Can I introduce the next little section?
Yeah,
sure.
Okay.
So
and now for our segue.
And now for the next part. So what's in the way of care plans?
Why don't we do it?
Why
are we even having this conversation?
And so we've all been through this. So why are we even having this conversation? And there are a lot of ingredients into why people don't make corrective care plans, meaningful care plans.
One is the structure, like you were just asking. How do you do it? How do you decide? The structure is a part of it.
How do you decide? What's the thinking behind it so that you can feel confidence? But another ingredient that we all deal with, and I think we always will deal with it. I'm not completely over it yet.
It's mostly him.
It's fear of rejection. What if they say no? And right? I mean, does anybody raise their hand if anybody has had even a feeling of fear of rejection that the patient's going to say, is it just me? Just me? Oh, a few of you. Okay.
Would have been great if we all didn't raise our hands, because then really,
then
in
it would
essence,
be just me.
He would have been rejected.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that wouldn't be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have, what's behind this fear of rejection? Well, one of it is a lack of personal experience and a lack of personal certainty that we have. And, you know, for us who are engaged in philosophical chiropractic, one of the ways that we can overcome this uncertainty and lack of experience, besides talking with mentors, people who will help us to light the way, to show us the way, is to think of to anchor ourselves to the principles of chiropractic, of why it is that chiropractic works so well, that when we make an adjustment and the body takes that adjustment and corrects subluxation and liberates the force of healing in the body, if we really can own that, we don't have to have as much uncertainty. This analogy that Pam and I were talking about earlier is that, you know, when a farmer plants seeds in his field, there's a reasonable and logical expectation that these plants will grow. Most of them will grow. And it's no different with chiropractic. That principle applies. You know, even in science and logic, there's this, you know, if you were to create a bathtub, you know, you guys don't have bathtubs there, but here we have bathtubs, and you fill it with water. And if you get in that bathtub, you can see the displacement of water. That's physics, right? You can actually see it. But the same principle applies if you were to take like a big rock and you were to throw it into a lake. That rock will displace water following the exact same principle as us getting into a bathtub and seeing it. Now, we can't see the water rise when we throw a rock into a big lake or into the ocean, but the principle is there. So we anchor to this notion that if we correct the subluxation with repetition over time, that by itself will change the direction. Does it always make people feel better? No. Does it always fix things? Not really. But we know by principle that in chiropractic that is what will change the trajectory of someone's life. And that's the beauty of chiropractic philosophy, that people that practice in a more mechanistic way, they don't even get to appreciate it. It's very sad.
I was going to add something, because we were talking about this fear of rejection or whatever it is. Like sometimes it's not about being rejected by the patient. Sometimes it's about being rejected by the chiropractic community that you're around. Because I hear that on coaching calls, people will say to me that other mentors or teachers that they had would talk about how gross chiropractors were that recommended a lot of care. And they were afraid to be one of those chiropractors.
Gross meaning unethical.
Unethical, and, immoral. Yeah, for themselves. Thank you.
Does that sound familiar?
Do you guys have any of that? Okay, yeah, people are saying yes. So
does it remind you of the initials WFC?
Well, so
yeah, could be, huh?
I was on the coaching call with this
guys. We have just more 8 minutes, and Felipe and Rafael wants to ask some questions.
Okay.
Okay,
yeah,
first of all,
guys.
Okay, first of all, I will start. It was not me that says something bad about WFC. Okay, I'm clear this time.
Yeah.
So, the next is, what do you think is the turning point for most of the people that get in it off to make this turning point, the mental, to go to the pain corrective medical culture for the chiropractic? Because for me, it was very personal. It was living chiropractic. It was an experience, not something that someone said to me. It was not a talk,
Yes, I understand. Mm-hmm.
Very important.
I think it's going to be different for every single person, what that turning point is.
Yeah. I can share what my experience was personally. And that was that someone said to me, a mentor said to me, he said, why wouldn't you give only the best recommendations for care, the same recommendations that you would give to your mother or father or sister, brother, or your loved ones, or to myself? Yeah, thank you. That's an important one. Mm-hmm. Why would I do anything else than the best recommendations? And that, it struck me very deeply, because it put a light on what we call a blind spot, which was this fear of rejection. So at that point, it was a turning point. I had this opportunity. I said, do I go here or do I go here? And I said, my commitment is going to be to excellence and to only give the best care. Like I would want, if my loved one went, or if I went to a chiropractor, what would I want that chiropractor to recommend? And that was basically it for me. I'll tell you this funny story. A mentor of mine, a guy named Len Fay, who he brought this thing called motion palpation to the United States. A Canadian guy, but he practiced in California. He said to me once, he said, look, think about it like this. If you went, if somebody goes to a brain surgeon and the brain surgeon says, look, you need brain surgery. I'm going to cut a piece of your skull out. I'm going to take this tumor out. I'm going to stitch your head back up. And the patient said, no, I don't want that. Do you think the brain surgeon would say, well, okay, how about a haircut instead? It's like we're either going to, it becomes at some point rather binary. We're either going to do what we know is the best care, or we're going to compromise on it.
Right.
And so that was the turning point for me.
I just want to add one thing, because I think, you're saying it came from within you, an experience happened, but for other people who are listening, they may not have that experience yet. They may not have it for themselves or their family. And so what I think also is that you just need a more linear way, and you just have to do it. I did have personal experience, but I also just had to do it and then see the effect of it. And so that might be another possibility for everyone's probably going to have a different experience of how they get there.
Yeah. And there's a lot at stake when you think about it. For me, it was, what's at stake really is this patient's health.
Yeah. But more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because,
way more than that.
I would say to a patient, no, like my reputation, you're going to say Dr. Pam doesn't work or chiropractic doesn't work, which is worse to me, so it's not just about your health. I really need to make sure that I take care of all those things. So,
yeah. Our reputation.
Here's another question.
The profession. Yeah, bye.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I have a little question. Can a technique change the time of chiropractic care?
I imagine so.
Can the
technique different techniques have different outcomes and different timelines? So that's what I was saying that before, that your technique is going to give you what your exam tells you, and then pardon me, COVID.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think it would make a difference for sure.
But it depends on what you're focusing on as the goal.
Right.
So for example, if your goal is to have structural changes that involve actual histological changes in the soft tissue, some techniques can accomplish that, but the fastest technique still requires several months. So it depends. That's a very good question, but it depends on what your metric is.
Guys, let me just give a very short interruption, because I'm a thinker and my brain just blow it up. I think that's just crazy, because even when we give one more step toward the culture of pure chiropractic, we still trying to debate the frequency of adjusting, the frequency to see the people to treat or to adjust. While we should have talking about the frequency of being evaluated, the frequency of being checked. So it's not dependent on this kind of technique or purpose or these things, because if it's different for the purpose of the treating pain or to fix something structural or to fix subluxation, it's not about this. It's about being checked to guarantee that we are all adjusted. So for me, it's a little bit crazy when we talk about this difference of the treatment or the difference of the frequency focused on the task, on the objective, and not being checked. I remember that Sigefus used to say that it's important for being checked every day. So we're going to try to make the best to reach this every day. If you can't, okay, 3 times per week is the minimum. If you can't, okay, you know what I mean? So even when we try to focus on philosophy, if we don't pay attention, we give this slide and goes to, okay, we will see less time because this technique is best.
It's a really good point. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of outcomes for sure. The question has an outcome because you are making the plan, but we always should be talking about people getting checked. It's everything.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things, it's a great point you bring up. And, there's an assumption that when someone comes in, you will check them, but we shouldn't assume that, because not everybody does. But one of the things that was very helpful for me was we tend to think of a subluxation as a thing, but we can also, as a thing that is there or it's not there. But we can also think of subluxation as a state of being. Now, conversely, on the other side of that same coin, we can think of adjustment as an event. I got adjusted. I adjusted you. But we could also think of adjustment as a state. Is this person in a state of adjustment? And in fact, what we want to do as part of our care plans is to maintain over time, which way am I going? This way. Maintain over time, right and left, a state of adjustment as best as possible. That's where you want to live, in a state of adjustment. And that's why this repetition over time, whether it's checking and adjusting. Now, one other thing to move on, if there's no more questions about this, we only have a few minutes left. ¿Cuántos minutos tem?
We went over the 1 hour.
Vivi has the last question.
Okay.
I have
And
one
then we
last
finish.
question. So I also understand that if we could be checked every day, we would. And we as a chiropractors is easier because we have colleagues. But now thinking about, you have the metrics, you know the frequency that you think this person needs, how to match this with the money, with the, how much, like, it's too high, it's too low. If I want a person to come every day, how much should I charge?
Yeah.
So a person can afford this,
Yeah.
you know?
So that's so important. And it's probably, the details are too much to go into right now. So maybe we'll do that next time. But in order to have a successful care plan, a meaningful care plan, you have to have in your office, in your clinic, an infrastructure to support it. In the world of commerce, it's known forever that people will reach into their pocket only a fixed number of times to pay for something. So if you have people who are paying each time they come in, it's very rare that someone is going to continue with their care plan. So it's important to make the recommendations and then offer payment options based on the recommendations. And in our offices, let me just speak to my, we do prepayment options, or what do you call it in Portuguese? Install parcelas. Yeah. So if I'm recommending 36 visits, I'm not going to sell them a package of 12 visits for a package. If 36 visits is what they want, I want them to come in. That's what is focused on with regards to the money. How they can pay it, there's any number of ways, but essentially they're being charged for all 36 initial visits. And the relief, Pam and I were talking about this, if you don't, so let me see how to word this. So if you've ever experienced this, it's very exhausting to have to recreate at each visit a patient's next visit, the reason and the logic, and whereas if they're signed up, if they're committed to a game plan, a treatment plan of, let's say, 24 visits or 36, they come in, they get on the table, you do your thing, you're done, and they're happy to leave and they're happy to come back. In other words, there's no having to recreate at each visit. It's very exhausting. It's exhausting for one patient, but when you multiply that times 30 or 50 or 100 patients in a day, it's burnout. It's a burnout for the doctor. You know the term burnout? You get your brain fries, and it's a dropout for the patient because they're not committed. You want to say something about?
I'm going to say exactly what he said. I do think it's a complicated process, the financial thing. So when you brought that question, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like another couple hours, because we do teach this and, teach it in stages and in steps. And you all have such beautiful and really insightful questions. There's a lot to it, but I think the financial piece might be the most complicated. We need just a conversation based on that alone, just to be thorough and to be good for you.
Oh, yeah. So I think we are good for the first one, but I think the second one we can thinking about how to charge. How do I know my price? No, because you are starting something. Yes. I think you need to know how much you need, the bills and everything. So everything you make you more successful. No, if you're charging wrong, if you're charging because this one charge this and it's not what you need.
Yeah. There's a lot of great ideas on how to do this. So don't stress about it. We'll be able to help you. There's very easy methods to determine the correct price, and also how to present the price so that the patient has a good feeling about the option that they choose, that they're happy to choose it. What is that? We're done.
So we have a lot of things to talk in next Café com Quiro.
Café.
I want to thank you all to be here with us in this night. And this conversation we did in English, but the next ones we are going to do in Portuguese and maybe in Spanish.
Nice.
So every talk is going to be different and with different people. Eu quero agradecer a todo mundo que participou. Eu quero agradecer o pessoal que entrou ao vivo aqui com a gente. Eu quero aproveitar para falar que esse é um programa do Núcleo Educação e o Café Olinto, que é o nosso apoiador, vai repassar para o Núcleo Educação o valor das vendas. Então, se você quer apoiar financeiramente a educação dos quiropraxistas no Brasil ou de novos estudantes, essa é uma forma de vocês ajudarem. Então, quem quiser o café, é só entrar em contato com o Tadeu, ou pelo Instagram, ou pelo WhatsApp. Mais alguma coisa?
Tell me, we want to know, was this valuable? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
For sure.
Much to talk about. We could go on for hours.
For sure. No, we need to have a matrix, to define the frequency, and the matrix again to see if the frequency is working or not. For sure. It's because we have a lot to talk, so we are going to have more Café com Quiro.
Once COVID is finished, we're going to come to Brazil.
You are welcome. More than welcome.
But we'll need like 2 days seminar and 2 dias na praia.
Very good.
Yeah.
Or maybe a seminar in the beach.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Great idea.
Let's arrange this, yes.
great idea. We can arrange that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Pam.
Love to all of you.
Obrigada, Vivi.
Thank you for all.
Muito obrigada, gente. Até o próximo Café com Quiro.
Thanks for doing this.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.